Welcome, everyone. We are here with Zainab Salbi. We were so excited when you said that you would join us today to talk about your new initiative. For those people who are new to your work, I'd like to give people just a little bit of background about you. Zainab is an Iraqi-American women's rights activist and writer, and she's currently the co-founder of Daughters for Earth, a new fund and campaign that inspires women to engage in climate change by mobilizing $100 million for on-the-ground, women-led efforts to protect and restore the Earth. She's frequently been named as one of the top women changing the world, including from people like Oprah and Bill Clinton. Watkins Magazine also identified her as their top 100 spiritually influential people. So what's the bridge to spirituality, you might be wondering? Well, we're going to cover that in our chat today. But let's just say that she has a lot of grit, but also love and compassion, not just for women, but also for the Earth. You may know her name through her work as founder of Women for Women International, which is dedicated to helping women survivors of wars and other atrocities. She's also the author of several books, including Between Two Worlds, The Other Side of War, Women's Stories of Survival and Hope, and her latest book, Freedom is an Inside Job, which we're also going to talk about today. So thank you for joining us.
Pleasure. My absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So what I'd love to do for people who are new to your work, let's rewind the clock just a little bit so viewers can understand the foundation that led you to helping women step into their power, but also your view of consciousness and why you feel that there's an urgency right now. So you came to the States, right, as an early age from Iraq. And, you know, even though your story is so different, right, from the average American woman and also very different from the women refugees that you've helped over the years, there was one thing that was just this overarching thing that most women feel at some point in their life, and that's feeling invisible. Not having a voice, not being seen. And then after the separation from your husband, you started learning what it was like to be you. And you talked about awakening creates a bridge to your authenticity. What was that moment for you what was the moment for you where you knew you weren't living your truth?
This is a loaded question. You know, I mean, in so many ways, right? Because there is not one moment. There are many moments, but also there isn't one husband. There's a couple of husbands. There were a couple of husbands.
I mean, not the first one. I'm sorry, the second one.
The second one that and I write about both of them in my books, you know. You know, if I am to narrow things into a moment, I would say really, you know, I was married, my second husband, it was a wonderful relationship, and the separation happened not because he was a bad guy at all. We're still very good friends. It was because just the relationship transformed into more of a friendship, which we still are. But there was a moment, I think, you know, he was already out of the house. We were already separated. I was at my home alone, and I woke up cranky, you know, and I just like, you know, itchy the whole day and moody. And I'm like trying to distract myself, you know, with cooking or cleaning or gardening or whatever. And it's like not like very cranky. And I realized at one point that if he was in the house, I would have probably created a fight with him, blaming him for doing this or that, right? You know, as partners do to each other, have the ability to hurt each other. I'm sorry, you know, we all do. But he wasn't in the house, and I couldn't blame him because he's not there, right? And no matter how much I'm distracting myself, I'm still not getting out of my funk. And I remember at the end of the day, you know, getting in my bed and realizing that, oh my God, and it's like as if my hand has a consciousness on its own, I promise, you know. I remember like the finger coming to me, and it's like, oh my God, it is me. It is me. And that was a transformative moment in which I realized not whether I was living in my truth or not, or any of that, but I was realizing that I am the issue, whatever it is. It's not him, it's not my work, it's not this person or that person, that I've got to deal with me. And it took me really to the hardest journeys of all, which is the journey inward. Now, as an activist, it's so much easier to shout and chant and give speeches and all of that, and putting all our energy externally, right, about what's going on with the world and all the bad things and the injustices and that's going on in the world, which they're all accurate and there, but that is distracting, from the journey inward, which is to like point the finger in here and says, oh my God, what do I need to discover or unravel in myself in order to find whatever the issue that I need to address, right? So I'm not sure if I answered your question, but it's a long story it's a long process. It's a long journey to lead me ultimately to a place of joy, I would say. It's contentment, and you slip between now and then, and then you go back and you do the journey inward and until you arrive at a place of being blissed and content.
Well, you're really talking about what's commonly known as, our shadow work or the dark night of the soul. And I always found it kind of not amusing, but interesting, ironical, right? That it's the dark night of the soul, not the dark nights of the soul. Like you said, it's not one pivotal moment, right? I feel like so often we go into one dark night of the soul and then the onion gets peeled back and guess what? There's more shadows, right?
There's more life stories. I mean, it's like every layer of the onion that is peeled. And for me, it's like, I call it peeling from the mummy, because it's painful actually to peel the layer, and every time it's like, okay, I arrived. Oh my God, thank you, God, and then, you enjoy it for a while until you have to peel another layer and another layer. And, I used to watch Star Trek in my days a lot. And there was one line where Captain Cards, asked a character that plays God, quote unquote, it's like, don't you isn't it enough to test us all the time, And the God character says, but the test never ends, the test never ends. And it's how we deal with it. Right now, it's not like life doesn't test you again and the world is not falling apart. It's just how you deal with it changes, and I would say that I have evolved from panicking and being anxious at whatever issues that I was facing to being more trusting of life, more trusting of myself, more trusting of the divine, that it will be okay, And so it's not that the challenges don't come, it's how we handle them changes in a way that is less edgier, less sharp, on our souls.
Yeah. There's another thing that a story really that really touched me about your book, because it reminded me of The Lemon Tree by Sandy Tolan, which you probably know, I'm sure. And this was when you returned to Baghdad and saw your home after so many years. And you said, nothing is left here but our stories. And of course, when you said that, I mean, you're a natural born storyteller. But at that moment, there was almost an epiphany in a way, the importance of story. And, what you've done your whole life is getting women's stories out to the world. So, what your raw narrative, I think, in here really got to was that you hadn't fully stepped into your truth because you hadn't gone to the dark side. So every ancient sage, mage, and spiritual master all talks about you don't get to the light unless you go through the dark, right? Because of the polarity. So when you did that deep shadow work, because there were several different incidents that you went through, right? Where you went into that shadow work. But this is what I loved. You said it not just brought you to the light, but it brought you to love. And I just loved that. I just loved that. So what was that peeling back of the onion like for you?
Well, I mean, you touch on so many aspects, you know, that I would want to like touch on. And one is, let's just talk about my home, my parents, my family's home in Baghdad, Iraq, because it became an execution center and then a brothel and a military base. And by the time I went to visit it, it was like an unrecognizable neighborhood and home. And like, it's just, it's a heartbreaking to also come from a country where, you know, every memory I have is destroyed, right? And in my case, it's the actual house that I grew up in, is our things are destroyed, right? So the first thing is it's made me realize all the things, you know, I'm calling you from New York City right now, and it's a very commercial, it's a very like buy everywhere. America is very much capitalism is like that. Europe is like that. There's a lot of buying and we're constantly buying and accumulating. And what I really came to realize in my life, that all of these things at the end, they don't matter. You know, we're like living in a time in which if I get this, I become happy. And I have experienced having everything and having nothing and losing everything and realizing they have no relationship to my happiness or joy or peace of mind. None, right? It's had momentary heartbreaks that's, you know, we lost all of the things, but then I like laugh at it now, you know, I'm like, ha, you know, I mean, and like, you know, I come from we lost everything, right? Like if you come to my home, I have a couple of pieces of art that is left of our entire memory, right? A lot of Americans may not associate with that unless if you've been through fire or lost all your belongings, you know, so it's, and then you laugh, you're like, oh, none of it, I'm still the lucky one. I am still the lucky one. We're still the lucky ones to be alive and healthy and smiling and working and the whole thing. So that's one aspect that I wanted to touch. The other aspect is really is again, because I am a storyteller indeed, but I'm also an activist. I'm someone who's dedicated to and who believes that all what the divine wants out of us, all what God wants out of me or you or anybody else is to show the best of us, to give the best of us to this humanity, to ourselves, to our communities, to this world, right? That's it's as simple as that for me. And so I'm dedicated to giving the best out of me. You know, sometimes I fall on my face and sometimes not, and sometimes all of that. And what I came to realize, but because you have this activist thing, so you're preaching, you know, good, preaching the other side about how they need to reform and how they need to do, until I caught myself at a point and a moment at a story in my life where I realized, oh my God, I am at risk of becoming what I am fighting against.
Yeah, just on the other side.
Right. And when I'm fighting, you know, if I was fighting for not to stereotype all women, I was stereotyping all men. If I am fighting against do not corner women into this or that, I was cornering men into this. And this is the story of one of my stories of awakening, right? And I caught myself like, oh my God, I am at risk of becoming what I'm fighting against, right? Which is, and it took me, it's humbling. Every time we like act out of righteousness, I know it, I'm right, and you're wrong. It's, you know, you fall. I fell, let me say, I fell. Mm-hmm. And it's humbling. The falling is humbling. And we have two different ways of dealing with our falling, right? It's either we become bitter and angry at the world, or we do the hardest journey, which is to go through the darkness of our souls and realize how we are not the perfect human that we think we are. And our values are not as consistent that we want to think that we are. And that if we are consistent, if I am consistent, and in a true way, if I am consistent in the purest way, then it's very hard to do. And it takes sacrifice and it takes discipline, and it's not easy. And I try to be disciplined, by the way. I really, in being, living my values, that's the result of the book that you mentioned, Freedom is an Inside Job. And every time I am trying to be disciplined, I realize it's so hard. It takes so much effort. It takes, social isolation at sometimes. It takes you being the odd duck in the crowd. It takes, lonely moments. It takes financial means or sacrifice. It takes, and that makes me more humble.
Yeah.
As an activist, as someone who wants to do good in the world and wants to see good in the world, it makes me more humble about the journey, because it is not easy to create the transformation and the change and the ethical consistencies that we actually want to see in the world. And so do it. But the more we do it, the more we actually have a different, the more I do it, the more I am more compassionate, I am more patient, I am more interested in dialogue, rather than I transform from being the preacher to being the bridge maker, because I realize it is not easy and it's hard. And instead of pointing the finger at the others, I decided, like, I will show my finger as well on myself and reveal that as a way to build bridge, that my lecturing of others is as much of building walls as I am criticizing their walls. And unless I am willing to dismantle these walls and reach out, then I always at risk of becoming what I'm fighting against. So I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, I think you're bringing up two things. One is, we can't do spiritual bypassing, right? So can't do that if we're really going to do the work, which is what you're referring to and why you wrote this book. And the second thing, and this brings in the science, right? The mirroring. We are mirrors to each other and we are mirrors to ourselves. So that moment you were talking about with your ex-husband or with a friend or the guy who ran the brothel in India, I think, right? All of these things that were kind of emerging and coming up, they're there to see the shadows of ourselves, even if we take a different stance, right? And so, science has data now that shows that mirroring in play, which is really bringing it closer to what the ancient sages and mages have always said, right? That we are mirrors to each other. And once we realize ourselves in the other, that's when the true freedom comes.
It's so true. It's so true. And Sufis believe, and a lot of mystics traditions around the world believe, that, we have to see the divine in everyone. And it's really hard, right? To see the divine in someone you hate. You're like, heck, I don't want to see that, or the aspect of you that you hate. But, life is everything. I like the traditions in Islam that God has 99 names, right? I grew up in a very secular household and yet a Muslim household. And the best gift my mom gave me, she's like, when I was a child, she said, honey, don't look at God only in the skies up. God, you should see God in everywhere and everything. You should see God in the trees and in the sand and in the flowers and in the air. And that was, it's almost like just pointing me to the right direction, at least from my relationship with the divine. But in Islam, and so I had always this issue of like religion is confining, spirituality is freeing. And I love God, and I don't care what God is actually. Everyone can define God the way they want, but there is this love I have, and and this belief I have. It's just love that I tear up just thinking about it, right? So, but it's interesting in Islam, God has 99 names, and it's only as an adult and looking at it from a spiritual perspective, who I am today, I realize that these 99 names are the shadow and the lights of each other. God is the merciful and God is the punisher. God is love and God is hate. God is like, they are the light and the shadow. And the 100th name is the collection of all of it.
Wow.
And I think it's so beautiful. It's truly so beautiful that God is all encompassing. Also in Islam, in Islamic prayers, at the end of the prayer, you are to thank your right angel and your left angel. And one is to the angel of goodness and one is the angel of badness. This is my language, right? And I never paid attention. I was like, whatever it is. And I was like, oh my God, I come from a tradition that actually acknowledge the light and the shadow in both of us. And we are to thank it every day in every prayers, the angel of light and the angel of shadow, constantly to thank it as a way to sort of for me, it's the same as the 99 names. It's an all-encompassing. We are all-encompassing. God is all-encompassing. You are all-encompassing. So it makes, for me, it brought me to a place of, again, more love, less judgment, more belief, and going through the hard way, like no bypassing in here. But it's worth it. It's worth it.
Well, if you think of all traditions, there's always a mystical element to it. And the Sufis, right? I mean, they had so much around oneness. And I love the Rumi quote that you brought up, silence is the language of God, because it's very similar to a quote I've had on my website for years that we don't even know, who it's attributed to, actually. But it's the world surrenders to a silent mind. Yeah, so it's very similar, right? So across traditions, right, you have this sense of silence. And I want to bring up something that you just raised, and that was beauty. You brought up beauty, which helps us get closer to peace, and peace helps us get closer to God, right? And then there was this moment, you said there was no better caretaker of your body and soul than you. And I think, although this is a message for all genders, right? And there's many more now than there was when you and I were in school, right? But really for women, right? For the feminine, because we don't do self-care and self-love very well, right? So I think this is a great kind of segue into self-love. And then the other word that especially Americans in the West or anyone in the West has a hard time with, and that's surrender, right? And so you talk about both of them in your journey. And do you want to talk about that? Because there was this moment you had, in Mecca, right, where you were going through this like beautiful experience where everything was blending, and it wasn't the experience that you wanted. It wasn't the luxury high-end experience you wanted. But once you surrendered into it, it was exactly what you needed.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned that I, was born and raised as Muslim. I still believe in Islam, but I also grew up in a secular household. And, I had always issues with the politics of, not the politics only of Saudi Arabia, but the particular attitude towards Islam that the Wahhabi sect has brought. And I am not comfortable with it at all. And I don't believe it carries the soul of Islam at all. If anything, it ruined it, or polluted it when it was not there. So when I got invited to speak at Saudi Arabia, this is many years ago, before the new government is in power. But I got invited to speak. I was launching a major Arab show for Arab women, and I had to go to Saudi Arabia, and I realized that Mecca was only 1 hour away. And now you have to understand that one of the tenets of Islam is to visit the house of God, which is in Mecca, right? And all of these things, I rejected all of these concepts, and I had tried and explored different traditions from, various indigenous traditions to Buddhism to everything. I explored actually and studied everything from Christianity to Judaism to Buddhism, to just constantly exploring people's connections to God, right? And here's the religion I grew up with, and it's like only an hour away from me. And so it's like, okay, let me go, And this was in the height of ISIS. ISIS was very much in power. There's a lot of tension in the Middle East. There's a schism between us as Muslims, between the liberals and the conservatives. And, I don't want to repeat the story, the details of it, but the point of the story for me is I went with like a lot of barriers and prejudice and worry and fear and all of these things. And at one point, you see in the Kaaba, the Mecca is just a one structure, all covered with a black fabric, and it is the house of God, quote unquote, right? As in there is a door. And when you pass by the door, everyone is like saying, greeting it. And you're going counterclockwise, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people where their bodies are against each other and moving in one unity. And in that moment, and I was looking at the faces, and they are like the faces of the liberal looking, cool, hip looking people. But they're also the faces of the like fundamentalist, scary looking people with the beard. And in that moment, and all the men were wearing white, all the women were wearing black. In that moment, when we're all pushed against each other, going counterclockwise, I realized like we are all one in front of God, right? We all think I am better than you. This is Islam. Is this what it is? But in that moment, we are really all one, and there was no difference between us in that space. And that night, I dreamt, asking God, were you there? Right? Because it's endearing to have a house for God, right? And what I heard from my dream is, no, this was not about me. This was about bringing you all in one place so you may see each other. And, it's sort of, it's the reason I all believe in love, because we have so much schism and we have so much tension and hatred with each other. And I think we have schism and hatred and anger with ourselves. And, and it's like, for me, it's like our relationship the more at peace I am with myself, the more I am in love with everyone else. The more I am at anger and anxiety with myself, the more I reflect that anxiety and anger at others. That's the truth, right? Mm-hmm. And I do believe that the path for a lot of the reforms and the changes happens not only, yes, there's time for punishment, but also there's time for love. And we don't explore the time for love as much. We explore a lot of punishing, cutting off, canceling. It's all punitive. It's all very masculine way about going and dealing with our differences. And we haven't given love a chance. And because I feel like even those who I am most angry at may have a chance to join me in my beliefs or in my values or making the world a better place if I relate with them in love rather than in anger. They may not, by the way, right? They may not. I have a video, I call it Love Fearlessly, because you show up, you speak, you give love. Some people will show up, and that's wonderful. And some people will ignore it, will spit on it, will laugh at it, and that's wonderful. There's a Rumi poem, and I'm going to paraphrase it, right? It says the garden is gorgeous and it's beautiful and the flowers are blossoming and the hummingbirds are all over and the butterflies and all. If you come, it is beautiful. If you do not come, it is beautiful. So for me, it's showing up with love. Some people will respond, some people will not respond, but it's worth it to give love a chance, right? Because we can't just keep on the canceling, the punishing, the putting in that path has a certain percentage of success and has a huge percentage of failure. And I think we should at least give the other path a chance as well.
Well, it's masculine, right? I mean, this is very brought down from, centuries upon centuries that we've been programmed and conditioned to be like that, even as women, right? And in order for us to have sustainable change, we need different, as you say, different leadership, different ways of thinking. And that comes to negotiating, whether it's with peace or, rape of women or whatever the issue happens to be. I mean, I certainly think the pandemic brought out the best and the worst of us, the worst being that polarity, right? We saw it everywhere, the anti-vaxxers, the vaxxers, the political divide as well in the United States and abroad. We saw it everywhere, right? But I feel like in that divide, it was like all of our shadows coming up to be healed. I don't know if you know Azim Khamisa. my guess is, you know, at least of him, right? Because he talks about forgiveness. He's also in the series. And we were talking exactly about that it's like the storm before the calm, right? That this needs to happen before the whole shift to a different consciousness.
Well, the consciousness happens also because we each need to raise and explore the meaning of what these new values are. And in my belief, and as you're saying also, I believe we need to explore the meaning of feminine values. And this has nothing to do with women, because look, I'm a woman and I lived with masculine values most of my life, right? And I'm only now trying to understand what are feminine values and how to live and lead with feminine values. And so this has nothing to do with men and women. We've been taught masculine values and they served us to a certain extent, right? They built the civilizations, infrastructures, all of that. And we are hitting its limits. Yes. Because it's destroying us as well. Yes. And we have minimized feminine values into be pretty and nice and kind and nurturing. And, you know, the more I explore the meaning of feminine values in myself or with my friends, feminine values are also fierce and strong and clear and loving and yes, true is kind and loving and all that, but they are also fierce. They're not only soft and being nice and feminine, you know, kind of thing. So, and I really believe that unless we make this century the feminine century, what's at stake is our humanity, because how we are relating to ourselves, to each other, to earth and to the divine has been destructive way of relating, right? They're all the same ways, always with anger and war and confrontation. And we've got to switch our relationship with ourselves, with each other, with the earth and with the divine in a way that actually, I mean, I can tell you I've gotten glimpses of it, right? It is worth it. It is worth it because I had no idea that one can feel that way of such joy and peace and love with nothing, with no material thing, with no possessions, with not even much around you, right? That it is possible to relate in a different way with each other in a more peaceful and loving way. It is possible. And so, but how do we do that? You know, we have to all discover. It's like, I went to Iraq, my home country, right after ISIS was overthrown, 3 weeks after ISIS was overthrown. And I went to Mosul. And the whole city of Mosul, which was a beautiful city, is absolutely destroyed and obliterated, you know, completely, just flat. And I was walking alone with my cameraman and my producer. They're all Iraqis, young folks. And so a lot of people were just walking into me and just talking with me. I'm a sort of a known figure over there. But the consistent thing, what they were saying to me throughout this whole conversation, came from the garbage collectors and the policemen and the teachers and the housewives and the students and everyone and the journalists. And they're like, we failed each other. Like the nuclear bomb this time was not someone throwing it from a plane. It was us. And that these old values of the promise of power and money failed us because we tried it. We tried it until we saw destruction. We first killed these people and these genders and this woman and this man and until our own sons turned on us and tried to kill us. Yeah. And I remember this one woman, she said, I do not need help in cleaning the rubble from my house. I shall clean it myself. I need help and understanding what these new value systems that we need to live by because you all failed us. And so how do we discover these values? It's in all of us. Is the journey inward that helps us discover these values and what makes each one of us tick in a positive way. That's where you dig the values. That's where the gems and the crystals inside our souls, and we need to find it and share it with each other.
Yeah, it's powerful. You know, and the thing is, our Indigenous elders have always known this, right? Regardless of what your culture is, but, here we are in North America, and have we paid any heed to our Indigenous elders? We haven't. I love that you brought up Ecuador in your Pioneers talk, because wow, what a sacred place, right? An amazing sacred place. There's the video that you showed in your talk about the women coming forward and protecting the land. And, one of the things that really astonished me about Ecuador, because I ended up going there by accident. It was, a girlfriend and I were like, where can we go? Last minute flight. Let's go somewhere where it's great nature. Hadn't been to Ecuador, and it was a cheap flight. And so we went there and we booked Galapagos at the last minute. And, it was just this incredible experience because, as well-traveled as I was, I had never really sat with people who were so connected. I mean, maybe the Costa Ricans, there are places, right? There are places, but they were really, really one with the earth. Do you want to talk about your experience down there and what you learned from them?
First of all, I have to be transparent. I've never been to Ecuador.
Oh,
I've been
you haven't? Okay.
I've never been to Ecuador.
Okay, I thought that was...
I told is of Ecuadorian women, which is one of the members of Daughters for Earth. But what I will speak about is what led me to this awakening that I need to connect with Earth in a different way.
Yeah.
And it was literally dying 3 years ago. And I moved from a very busy New York day to being rushed into the operating room, where they found a quarter of a gallon of liquid pressing on my heart, and being in the ICU for a week. And then it led me to an unknown viral infection that made me really out of commission for a year and a half, right? And in that time where I could barely breathe and I could barely walk and I could barely think, it was very, very, very scary experience because you lose your tools, your skill sets. I couldn't articulate myself, for example, in words. And, I sort of, two things happen. Is sort of question, who am I? If I am not this person who speaks, or if I'm not this person who create this or wear this or whatever, then who am I? And I couldn't live in cities because the sound of cities was really harsh on my nervous system. So I had to live in the countryside. And in that time, when we are on our knees, right? When there was everything is stripped. At least when everything was stripped away from me.
That's full surrender.
That's forced also surrender.
Yeah.
It wasn't even willing surrender. It was forced surrender. But then again, every time I'm confronted with a dark moment in my life, I really go into that question. Do I hold on tooth and nail with it, like scared, or do I let go and surrender? And every time I have surrendered to it, I have come to trust myself that I can come out of it, right? And come and trust nature and trust life itself. And every time I held tooth and nail, no, I regret it, because then it makes you sick and it makes you worried, it makes you anxious, and it doesn't pay off, basically, right? So in this case, I was pushed to the edge. I call myself living between the land of the living and the land of the dead for like a year and a half. But the point of the story is that then now I am walking slowly in nature. And I felt the trees became my cheerleaders. Honestly, they were like, you can do it. And when I was unable to breathe, each wave, I happened to live by my friend's home by the ocean, and each wave was like giving me electric shock to my lungs, to breathe again. And I came out of it. And what healed me ultimately is I changed my diet to a vegan diet, and I changed my lifestyle to a more nature-oriented lifestyle, and came out of it with two things. One is a new rules for a happy day, right? I used to have my rules for like my checklist for a happy life or successful life. And there were a lot of it about external manifestation of things. Do I have this? Have I accomplished this? Did I get this? Da, 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 da. And then after coming out of this experience, I have a new rules for a happy day. I call it day because there's no such a thing as a always happy life. There's a content attitude, but not a happy. Like life by definition means up and down, right? Happy day though is manageable, right? And so And they're very basic. Drink lots of water, eat healthy food, connect with nature, connect with family and friends, be in the presence of art, live your purpose. And the most important of all is an appointment with my heart. An appointment with my heart, which is to actually have the time and the space and look at it as an appointment, because it's a respectful relationship, not, oh, I'm meditating. It's a respectful relationship with my heart, right? And then the day I skip it or I don't do it, I'm like, I'm so sorry. I'm talking with it. Like, I'm so sorry. I have not forgotten to come back to you, but it treated it in a different relationship than I had before. But out of that came also, I believe that, oh my God, I owe it to Mother Earth to do everything possible to be in service of it, because I had taken it for granted, as many of us had. And, that I feel like it saved me. Nature saved me. And that the relationship, right now there's so much discussions about climate change and all of these things, that the relationship is no longer an intellectual one. It's an emotional one that I owe to do whatever I can to do for Mother Earth, right? And that's, became the birth of Daughters for Earth. It wasn't Ecuador, it wasn't any country, and I've been to many, many countries in the world. It was very intimate and a personal relationship that, oh, we need to relate to Earth in a different way. And I always tell the story, if Earth was a friend, sometimes I call it, if Earth was a lover, she would have broken up with us a long time ago for being the worst friend ever, for being greedy, narcissist, selfish, controlling, unappreciative. I mean, like, we all have a friend like that, and you're like, I'm out of that friendship, right? And Earth has the same relationship with us, and that the fact that she's still there and she's still loving us, it's a magnificent story not to be taken for granted. And so from that came Daughters for Earth, which is basically to mobilize $100 million to support women-led efforts to protect and restore the Earth, which is common sense, right? There's so much discussion about climate change, whatever, and I'm not a scientist nor scientifically oriented, but apparently the science says, one of the most important things that we can do right now, all of us, for Earth, is to protect 50% of it, to basically give it a break, that 50% of the land and water. And it makes so much sense, because when we're sick, what do? We sleep, we drink lots of water, we eat healthy food, and we restore ourselves. Apparently, it's the same with nature. You just need to leave it alone for a while for it to restore itself. So we decided, what I realized is that actually women are very active in restoring and protecting the Earth. They're doing a lot of work on these issues. They're not being acknowledged for their work. Of course, they're not getting money. I mean, they're getting 2 cents out of every dollar that is coming to the issue. And they're leading with feminine values. And that came the birth of Daughters, which is, let's put more support, more voice, more backup behind women who are doing the work, but also let's lead with feminine values, because unless, again, we make this century the feminist century, what's at stake is our humanity. Yeah. That's what's at stake.
Our species. I mean, our species is really going through a reckoning right now, if you want to use that language. I think, I do think the coronavirus, personally, I feel it was a collective consciousness that brought it into our field. Even at a subconscious level, right? Because we realized the Earth needed to restore herself. And that was a time that she had a break. There were waters in Venice. They spoke about they've never seen the water that clear. And, I remember seeing the skies, right? In Northern California, clear, not cloudy. So I think that was our collective consciousness doing that. Some of us learned our lessons from it, and some of us didn't, right? And so I think it's like planting a seed. We're planting a seed. I mean, just as Marianne Williamson, love her, hate her, whatever, but at least she brought love to the table
100%.
In the political climate. So she planted a seed. And so I think the coronavirus planted a seed. You're planting a seed, a big seed. We all are, right? Each one of us,
I really believe that's all what is asked of us is to show the best of us, to give the best of us. The best of us is usually beautiful and is loving. We just need to give that a chance, right? And to share it. Because if I am a joy, then I'm giving the best of me to you and vice versa, right? And so, yeah, I mean, it's all of us that's planting a seed, as you said.
So what have you started doing first with the organization? I know you're trying to mobilize and raise money. Where did you start and where do you want to go next? What could be most helpful? If people can't write checks, what else can they do? And if they can write checks, where can it go?
Well, in both cases, come to daughtersforearth.org. And it doesn't matter if you can or cannot. There is the money part, which is we're finding all these women-led efforts around the world. And 40% of them are Indigenous women, basically, who are doing amazing work. And we're saying we're going to put more money behind them because they're really not getting much support at all. So that is the money part. But also another part of Daughters for Earth, which is going to be coming up in a couple of months' time, which is a toolkit to give each person, each one of us, you, me, our communities, the tools and the resources to understand the science in a very basic way, to understand how I can create personal changes in my life or in my community life. The things that I have changed in my life, I learned it from my friends, to be honest, less from papers and studies and all of that. And so what we're doing is, what we realize, there are a lot of women who are saying, talk to us. The climate change movement is not talking with them. They're like, talk to us, mobilize us. We want to do something. And we all know there's nothing is as powerful than when a group of women get together and get the job done. I can't tell you. I've been a witness to it. I've been part of it. And it inspires me. And it's just like, it's the fire in my heart, basically. And so Daughters for Earth is asking women to basically join the daughterhood. We have motherhood, we have sisterhood. This is the daughterhood. In our daughterhoods, we're all equal because we're all part of this earth, right? So we'll be giving toolkits for each one of us to understand, this is what they say the science is, this is what it means in commonsensical way. The gibberish that all the slogans, the climate movement, which I don't understand much of it, we're translating it into a day-to-day language that you can understand. You and I can understand, at least I can understand, right? And then their behavior change, like small things. I'm always excited about learning these small things, to kill the weeds between your, in your stones is not, don't put chemicals. Actually, if you just put boiled water on the weeds in between the stones, it dies forever. Like small tips like that, where we can share with each other to create the movement. So find who are the ones who are protecting and restoring the earth, support them, raise awareness about them, celebrate them, but also give each one of us, you and I and everyone else around us, the tools to create the change that we need to change, but we often don't know what it is, or how to do it. And the toolkit would help us to do that.
Yeah, I think the inconvenient truth, right? When it first came out, it was pushed, right? I mean, it had all great data, but it's like, well, that's grandiose. How is that affecting me? And because it didn't, or people couldn't understand how it did, nobody did anything. I mean, some people did, environmental groups did, but it wasn't as if because of that film, because of that movement, that suddenly 50% of people stopped drinking in plastic bottles, right? That didn't happen overnight. Right. And that's like a little thing, right? I mean, it's a big thing and it's a little thing, but, if we can get that on the shelves so that we have as many choices of non-plastic as plastic, it needs to be convenient.
Not only convenient, it needs to be affordable also, because it's also a lot of these changes are expensive. And this is, look, we started the conversation about being in alignment between our values and our behavior.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, and that when we are truly in alignment, we realize the alignment is not necessarily easy and sometimes it's hard, right? And I can't tell you how many female friends I have, right, who are against climate change, I mean, who are like, want to do everything for climate change, who are liberals, who are doing it, and you open their refrigerator and it's full of plastic bottles of water, right? And these are people in my life. These are my beloved friends. And I am horrified. I was like, okay, so you think of yourself as this cool person who is liberal, who is going to vote for all the climate change policy. It starts with you, with the simple act of just don't do that. And it's inconvenient. You don't drink, you don't buy that. It's not easy. It's sometimes so much easier if you just, but it takes discipline. And the more we are disciplined, the more we are in alignment in ourselves, and the more we're compassionate on how do we go about creating the change, right? So anyway, I went into, but for me, it's like you mentioned the plastic bottles, and the simplest things, and some things that we can all accomplish, and we don't all accomplish. Actually, it's the easiest thing we all buy. That, right?
I mean, I think that's the thing. It's the convenience factor, particularly when you travel, right? You go into an airport or whatever, and that's the only thing that you can grab. I know there was, I can't remember the name of the guys who founded the water company where everything was in boxes. Do you remember? And
no, I don't, but I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
it didn't really last because it was so expensive, I mean, I think that's really the key is getting that awareness to where it affects people. And I think people will, and I hate to say this, but people will get sick. And I think that's going to be one of the things when you're, plastic kills the fish in our oceans, but it's also seeping into our system.
It's true. Right.
As well, right? And so that's going to start impacting people. So anyway, any parting words? I know you I don't know if you covered all 4 chief goals of the organization. I know you said put money in the hands, raise awareness that these women climate warriors exist, right? Mobilize the women with behavior changes and demonstrate with female leadership. But anything else, like parting words of, because I know you were talking about modeling a new way of leadership, right? And that's another big part of the goals of the organization as well.
My motto in life is to speak your truth, live your truth, be your truth. And so my parting word is to wish that for everyone, and for every woman, and for every daughter in particular, to speak your truth, live your truth, be your truth. Because unless we do that, we are invariably sometimes complicit in our own oppression or the oppression of our beloved earth. And when we speak our truth and be our truth and live our truth, then we become part of the healing rather than part of the silence that keeps the oppression going. And so, I always say in my 20s and 30s and 40s, I used to charge forward. And it's not that I'm not charging forward, and I shall die trying to bring love and truth and justice to this world. It's just the way that I am going about it, and I'm advocating for people to go about it right now, is to do it with love and to kindness towards ourselves, towards each other, towards earth, and towards the divine, for me.
Yeah, I love that. And I think one of the things that I love so much about this organization is that, of course, it would be stereotypical of us to say, only women care about the earth, and, but you have lots of stats to prove that, actually, to show that, to demonstrate that. So it would be stereotypical to say that, but as nurturers, that's how we're wired. We're wired for connection. So women are wired for that. So to bring such a big issue like climate change and the environment and nature in the hands of women, I think is the way to go. It's going to be, that's going to be the beginning of the healing. And I think, we'll get support initially from our Indigenous male brothers, right? And then it will start to hopefully seep out to the rest of humanity.
Well, the invitation is for all. It is for all. And there are good men out there, and there are bad men out there, and there are good women out there, and there are bad women out there, and there are good genders out there, and there are bad women genders out there. It's really for all. And it just, for me, I happen to my call in life is to support women and marginalized voices, and that's just my dedication. But I've also encountered some wonderful genders, including male, out there and outside of the indigenous. So the invitation is for all.
It is, yeah.
But the focus for daughters is for the daughters.
Yeah, and hopefully, in this effort, we can awake the connection and the oneness, that feeling that you had on your journey, where the oneness, right? We were all connected into the sea, into the ocean, right? We are the drop of water, but we're also the ocean.
It's
and
so
once
true.
we realize that, right, then we will naturally take care of the environment, because there won't be any other choice.
It's true. It's true.
So
well,
anyway, with that, thank you so much. This has been incredible.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your patience, the conversations, the questions, and the beauty that you do bring into this world. Thank you.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you so much.